Hello and welcome to PM Express. My name is Nana Ansakwao and we are coming to you live from the Alisa Hotel. But today the issue is to eat or not to eat, and we're talking about GMO. We get very sentimental when GMO is mentioned. However, it's been in production for many years, and some of the chickens and corns we are eating are GMO. Are we dead? Are we about to die? What is it? Indeed, food is one of the basic things where as soon as there's scarcity, man becomes very aggressive, and it has sent nations to war, and therefore we should guide it. But the population of the world is growing, and we need to feed them all. Should GMO not be the way to go so we reach out to everybody? Well, I don't know, but with me sat here in the crowd talking is Dr. Vandana Shiva, who is an agroecologist and an advisor to the Indian government, and also a very well-renowned, noted for anti-GMO campaign. Doctor, you're welcome.
Thank you.
First of all, what brings you to Ghana?
What brings me to Ghana is solidarity with the movements that work on the same issues that I work on in India and worldwide. And those issues are the protection of biodiversity, the promotion of an agriculture that works with the laws of nature rather than against them, ecological agriculture, agroecology, that works to promote healthy, safe food for all, and more food through ecological production, and most importantly, the right of the last child to eat, but to eat healthy and safe.
Can we produce more food without GMO?
Yes, in fact, GMOs is a decline in food production. First, let me tell your audience what a GMO is. Now, genetic modification sounds like it's been around forever. You are a genetically modified version of your parents. You're not a clone of your parents. But genetic engineering is different. What we call GMOs are actually genetically engineered organisms. There is no chicken that is today genetically engineered. The Israelis tried to make featherless chicken so we wouldn't have to spend money on plucking the feathers. There's lots of research going on around the world, crazy ideas, rats with human ears on them so that they will be transplant. But the reality of the world is there are 4 crops that account for most cultivation of genetically engineered food, which is corn, canola, which is a mustard variety, soya, and GMO cotton. What is genetic engineering? Rice has bred with rice, rats have bred with rats, humans have bred with humans. Genetic engineering uses the tools of what is called gene splicing, and it's able to cut DNA strands from one organism and put it into another organism that is not related, that would never have reproduced with that organism. So they have put pig genes into fish. They've put human growth hormones into cows. They've put cow genes into wheat. They've put scorpion genes into cabbage. Dr. Bishop in Cambridge actually was working on this. The implications of this were not fully known, and that's why we created an international biosafety protocol. And I was on the expert group of the United Nations that wrote the framework laws. Every genetically engineered crop, therefore, has genes that don't belong to it. They're usually toxic. There are bacterial genes in BT cotton that produce a toxin in the plant. Every GMO has antibiotic resistance markers because it's a bad technology and they have to select the failed absorption by cells and the others. Then they have to add viral promoters. Now, the bacteria can hybridize with bacteria in our stomach. This is called horizontal gene transfer. The viruses can hybridize with viruses in our stomach or viruses in the guts of animals that have fed it. So genetic engineering is not ancient. It's just 20 years old. And in these 20 years, most countries have stayed GMO-free, as has Ghana so far. If at all you're eating GMOs, it's because it's imported from South Africa. There is an attempt to push genetically modified cotton on you, and I can share with you the Indian experience. But the BT cotton and the herbicide-resistant corn or soya has lower per acre productivity because it's not a mixed system which grows more. But most importantly, there is actually a decline in yield because you weakened the organism and the plant so badly and there is research done on this in the Zurich Technical Institute, that the physiology of the plant weakens, and therefore it suffers from more pest attacks, therefore it's not able to maintain the rigor of its balancing mechanism, and you have a yield drag. In India, in BT cotton, in the last 5 years, there's been a decline of 100 kilograms per hectare of cotton yield. In any case, the measure of the yield of a monoculture is wrong, because biodiversity is the way agroecology works. And when you work on biodiverse systems, per hectare you produce more food, and not just food, every other need. A small farm in our kinds of societies needs to produce its fuel, needs to produce its fiber, needs to produce its nutrition, needs to produce some herbal medicine, it needs to produce the thatch for the roof. All of that output is much higher in ecological systems. And the secret is the GMO system is not a food system. Both because the GMOs are not really worthy of being eaten, which is why most of the world is GMO free, but more importantly, because an industry driven by profits is not producing for hungry people in the world. It's producing where profits are. Highest profits today are in biofuel and in animal feed. 90% of the GM corn is going for biofuel and animal feed. It's food grain, but it's not going to people. That is why we have more hunger in the world. 70% of the food is produced by small farmers. That's where the attention of all government should be. This is the year of the family farm. This is the year we should be celebrating the small farms that give us real food, not the large-scale farms, now increasingly justifying the land grab of Africa, that are not producing food. We have been told lie after lie after lie about feeding the world with chemicals, poisons, and GMOs.
Doc, I'm amazed because I thought that GMO will increase the yield.
No, it doesn't.
I'm surprised that it actually declined.
It actually declines. And whatever is the yield of a plant doesn't come through genetic engineering. Genetic engineering is actually a very crude technology. It's like my saying that I create you when I shoot you. Because all that genetic engineering does is take a gene and shoot with a gene gun. Literally, it is called a gene gun in the labs. They shoot with a gene gun. Or they infect with a plant cancer to transfer the gene that you want to introduce. Now, the original planting material creates the yield. The decline in yield comes from the violence you're doing to the cells and the metabolism. One of the things genetic engineering is ignoring is that today, the cutting-edge science is telling us that every cell is organized. You have 50 trillion cells in your body. Each of them is doing its work. Plants have trillions of cells. And those cells, within them have genes. Each of them is regulating the system. When you shoot, you are disrupting the metabolism and physiology of that organism, which is why you have all the implications. In addition, you have introduced a new toxic gene, which then moves through pollination to other plants. It goes into the soil. We've done studies on how BT cotton has killed soil organisms. Cornell has done soil organisms. 22% beneficial organisms. Like if this leaf was to fall in the soil, there's bacteria called the Actinomyces that eats it and turns it into soil. When that bacteria is no more, this leaf will keep lying on the surface. It will not be digested and won't turn into soil. In Cornell University, they did studies on how the BT corn, pollen fed to larvae of monarch butterfly died. The monarch butterfly died. And fed normal corn, they were fine. 75% of the monarch butterfly population are gone because of BT crops on the one hand and spraying of herbicides like Roundup on herbicide-tolerant crops, which are killing the milkweed on which the monarch feeds. So we have to take an ecological view of the whole system.
Doc, let me come in here because with this herbicide, one of the big arguments is that, especially the small farmer, to save him from buying herbicides and spraying, you just have a, insect-free or anti-insect corn so that they don't have to go through that. So in other words, saving them money. And that's one of the arguments that, pro-GMO people would say that, you know, you plant corn, which you don't need to spray. The corn itself will kill the insect.
It's advertising, but it is not reality. You put a gene to produce a pesticide into the plant. Now that pesticide is eating all beneficial organisms. Why were pesticides failing? Because they would kill the spiders, they would kill the beetles, they would kill the friendly insects that control the pests. BT cotton is doing exactly that, except that now instead of spraying from outside, you are producing from every cell. In India, in the BT cotton, there are so many new pests that were never pests before. Aphids, jacids, mealybugs, army bugs, and the bollworm, which it was supposed to control, has become super resistant and can't be controlled. Farmers are using 13 times more pesticides than before. But more importantly, they're not just spending more on pesticides, they're spending more on the seed. Genetically engineered seed is only produced for one reason by corporations like Monsanto, and that is to own the seed. And through owning it, through breeders' rights, which is where your breeders' rights bill comes into the picture, or through patent law, where they create property in seed, and then they collect rents from the farmer. The cost of cotton seed jumped 8,000% in India after the introduction of GMO seeds. That is why our farmers got into deep debt. That is why 284,000 Indian farmers have committed suicide because of the debt trap. This is not a way of making farmers save money. It is a way of extracting the last drop of blood from third world peasants for the super profits of 5 corporations. But take the second family of crops, the herbicide-tolerant crops. Roundup ready crops. They were supposed to control weeds. American farmland, half the farmland, 17 million hectares, are taken over by super weeds that can't be controlled by Roundup. Now they're spraying Agent Orange. Monsanto is paying $12 an acre to farmers to say, go buy most expensive herbicides because Roundup isn't working. This is a failed technology, and it's being brought to Africa after 20 years of failure in the countries which have had experience with it. And the reason you are not being allowed to know the reality is because quite simply, they are seeing trillions of dollars in profits. If farmers are made to stop saving seeds through laws like the breeders' rights law, or governments are made totally dependent on buying GM seeds, can you imagine Ghana's poverty if every farmer was paying 8,000% more on seed? Can you imagine the poverty of Ghana as a country as an economic drain takes place in foreign exchange to pay royalties to these companies? Brazilian peasants sued Monsanto because Monsanto was collecting $2.2 billion in royalties on soya. And the peasants said this is totally unjust. So every GM seed is a property of Monsanto. A farmer can't save it, can't exchange it, and they collect royalties. They call it their intellectual property rights.
Doc, let me take a break here, and this is getting very exciting, very educative, I hope. Some of ministers who are trumpeting that GMO is the way to go, I hope you're watching and taking a note from it. We're coming straight back. Hello and welcome back to Eat or Not to Eat. We're talking about GMO. Is it profitable? Is it worth it? But definitely Dr. Vandana is educating us very, very much. Doc, one thing amazes me with Africa or Ghana is that we have so much land, we have so much manpower. So I sometimes marvel why a continent like Africa would even consider GMO at this stage in its agricultural evolution. I think, you know, we're still, I was saying people who run out of land, may say Japan, to think of GMO, but
Japan is GMO free. And it's GMO free because its consumers just refused, absolutely refused. As I said, most of the world is GMO free. The countries that grow GMOs on a significant scale are Argentina, Brazil, United States, Canada. On cotton they entered India. In corn they've entered South Africa. The European continent is by and large GMO free. A little bit of corn in Spain. So we are talking about a minority of countries. Why are they desperate to grab Africa? Why were they desperate in the first round of colonialism? Because Africa has wealth. Africa has been made artificially poor by the stealing of the minerals, by the stealing of the land, and the stealing of the financial wealth through the debt repayment. I remember the movement for Jubilee, which said, we have paid the debt 100 times over. And in fact, you owe us more. This is a whole new debt-creating cycle. Now, as you said, there is no continent as abundant in land as Africa. There is no continent that has farmed so long as Africa. This is where human species was born. There is no land with a deep relationship with the earth in its indigenous cultures, which is still alive no matter how long colonialism has tried to destroy it. Africa has become the battleground for pushing GMOs by creating an impression that Africa's hunger is because of Africans not knowing how to do farming. No, Africans' hunger is because of exploitation. As a friend of mine said when the European Union was building more and more walls, and as more and more Africans try and escape to Lampedusa in Italy and sink in the boats, and some racist politicians talked about the invasion, and she said, Africa has been invaded. And it's the invasion of Africa that has created the hunger and poverty, and now they want to offer a new round of invasion based on ownership of the seed, grabbing of our biodiversity, grabbing of the land of Africa and the water of Africa. And we are talking at this point in 2014 about one system and one paradigm that has totally failed. It's based on the colonizers' interests, on their making profits. It's based on them controlling the resources of the world. At the Rio +20, which took place in Rio in 2012, 20 years after the first Earth Summit, I was there in the first Earth Summit where we created the laws for biosafety. At Rio +20, it was very clear what the northern agenda is. They don't care about food. They don't care about people. They know that fossil fuels are running out. We've reached what's called peak oil. Now the oil will only go down. They are finding alternatives. And alternatives are the land and biomass. As they say, we're going to use biomass to produce everything we've done with fossil fuels. To produce biomass for biofuel, for plastics, they are grabbing the continent of Africa. As I said, only 10% of the GMO corn and soya goes to feed people because there are more profits in feeding cars. There are more profits in torturing animals. So what is at stake with GMO is not just one tiny issue. It is what will the future look like? What will the land, the abundance of the earth, the intelligence of human beings be used for? Will it be used to marginalize, disenfranchise, impoverish 90% of the human population so that all the land can be taken over by the industry which is converging? The biotechnology industry, the oil industry, Shell and IT industry, that's why Gates is so active on the green revolution in Africa. Information technology is becoming the way to patent life. They just read the genome. Africa is a very strange map. It's straight lines because they sat in Europe and said, this will belong to me, Gambia will belong to the British, Senegal will belong to France, and they chopped up Africa with lines. They're doing the same kind of mapping, except that now it's not about the land alone. It's about the life within life forms. The genome is being used to take over the ownership of the earth and her resources, and instead of biodiversity and our seeds helping us to grow food with our knowledge and our sovereignty, which is why we talk of food sovereignty, they would like all of life's living potential to be used to expand a failed non-sustainable system for another 20 years. This is about the future of humanity on this planet. It's about extinction versus a future promise. It's about slavery for a short time till we are made extinct, or freedom to live on our terms with all of the earth and her diversity.
Doc, what do we do with a peasant farmer in 2014? Because the peasant farmer is not making that much money. And sometimes, you know, they grow a little bit and it's not even enough to sustain until the next harvest. That person is vulnerable and therefore will buy into whatever is said. So if some minister is trumpeting that, oh yeah, these are your new seeds, they're going to go for it. What do we do to improve the lives and the yield of the peasant farmer so he's not too vulnerable?
The first thing is, every peasant farmer of Ghana should know that these seeds that are genetically engineered are patented. Royalties are linked to it. They will be more costly. Farmer cannot get rich that way. He'll get indebted. He'll lose the land. If the situation is like India, he or she will commit suicide. And that's what the Food Sovereignty Ghana movement is doing, to bring awareness to farmers who are being misled. Your politicians are being misled. The second very important thing is to take the science of agroecology and see what it has achieved. In 2002, there was a drought in southern Africa. That was the year the Earth Summit of Johannesburg was taking place. And all the African countries were reporting how bad things are. The United Nations, the World Bank, all joined in hands to create an international assessment on agricultural science technology for development. For 6 years, 400 scientists worked together. And they came up with the conclusion: genetic engineering cannot feed the world. Only agroecology and indigenous knowledge can. If today the poor peasant of Ghana or the poor peasant of India is poor, it's because of two reasons. First, their resources have been taken away from them and they're somehow managing to produce in a very marginalized way. Second, a globalized system has destroyed the pricing mechanism. I don't know what it's like for the cocoa farmers, but I can tell you, in the period of growth of the coffee industry, coffee profits jumped from 49 billion to 90 billion. And at the same time, the earnings of the coffee grower dropped from 7 to 4, which is why coffee growers abandoned their coffee plantations. The industrial globalized system driven by corporations is designed to sell farmers costly input, costly seeds, costly chemicals. Then it's designed to buy cheap from the farmer, which is why they're pushing everyone into producing the same few commodities. So the farmers are always selling in distress because they're only those buyers. Third is, they speculate on the prices. So I might sell wheat at 4 rupees a kilo, and when I go to buy it as flour, I will buy it at 20 rupees a kilo. That gap is going to the profits of trade, agribusiness, and the rest. So the way to improve the farmer's lot, and that's what we've done in India, is first stop the drain of the farmer's wealth for costly chemicals and seeds. Seeds must stay in farmers' hands. How do you substitute chemicals? By practicing ecological methods of pest control, soil fertility renewal, establish scientific systems. That's agroecology. You produce without external inputs. That means everything the farmer earns is an absolute net profit. But you do more. Instead of allowing farmers to be exploited by an unfair market which pretends it is a free trade market, we need to create fair markets for farmers. We've done that through the movement I've built in India with 750,000 Indian peasants. Our farmers are growing more food, twice the amount. They have increased their incomes some 5 to 10 times more. And people are getting healthier foods in the city because a narrow base of toxic food is the surest recipe for disease and ill health. The surest recipe for health is growing healthy food on healthy soil, shortening the distribution system. You have such amazing retail on the streets. I said it's a supermarket on the streets here in Accra. I think the energy of the people of Ghana can be used to create markets of fresh food, fresh organic food everywhere. Our Prime Minister has just announced organic will be India's priority. It's a new Prime Minister. The last government had tried to push through 200 GMO approvals. It's been stalled. So I don't think we should treat it as an inevitability that GMOs will come, and the small farmer produces more, should have more returns. There is no reason why a small farmer should be in poverty. There's no reason why a small farmer should be in hunger. My own mother, as a farmer, she chose to become a farmer, gave up a government job. She sent me and my sister and brother to school on her earnings. My father had a government job, but from farming at that time, because the government support was there, the government support has been withdrawn through the neoliberal policies. Then farmers are being exploited. Farmers buy tomato seeds for 150,000 rupees and sell tomatoes for 2 rupees. How can that economy work? And everyone loses. The earth loses, the farmer loses, and citizens lose because they're eating food that causes disease and ill health. So we need to shift. And luckily we have the solutions and they're proven.
The main thing is governments. And I don't know how India is like, but if you look on the continent of Africa, you know, leadership has been really challenging, if I may say. And these guys pushing GMOs have got the money to influence. What does civil society do to try and block these things and, you know?
I want to remind people in Africa that while the international treaties were being made, Africa was the leader in saying we don't need GMOs. It was the leader in creating the biosafety protocol. And it has created a model act for all of Africa. It's only in the last few years. And one reason they're coming to Africa is because they're losing everywhere else. And they think by making it look like that when they bring a US aid project or a Gates Foundation project, that they're helping Africa, that people won't rebel in the same way. So what can civil society do? The first thing civil society must do is increase the awareness and education of the general public. This is not just an issue of farmers. It is significantly an issue of farmers because they suffer immediately at the economic front. But it's also an issue of eaters, as you said, to eat or not to eat. Because to eat GMO is as good as not to eat because it's not good for your health. There are studies done around the world where studies are allowed to be done, and they're very costly studies, on the health impact.
Let me take a break here because I need a lot of emphasis on the health impact, because the argument is that you've been eating GMOs all this while, you're not dead, Americans have eaten it, they are not dead, what's the big deal? Stay tuned. Well, it's almost frightening, isn't it? Well, welcome back. I'm talking to Dr. Shiva here, and he's educating us on whether to eat GMOs or not. The argument has been that Americans have been eating GMOs. We import chickens from Brazil, Argentina, we eat GMO. So, Doc, is there really a health implication, or is this just a sentimental thing that, oh, don't alter my food? It's just sentimental, or there's a proven track record to say, listen, this thing is going to collapse your lungs or something like that?
Well, on the American front, I was in Rio when we signed the treaty on biodiversity, which had biosafety in it. President Bush walked out. He said, I'm not letting my biotech industry get hurt. He went back and said, we will not examine the impact. He called it substantial equivalence. He said, pretend that a genetically modified food is equal to a non-genetically modified food. No lab in America can study the impact. So when they say we have proof of safety, it's basically saying we've never studied it. Ignorance of safety is not proof of safety. It is ignorance of harm. The places where this has been studied is Europe, because it takes a lot of money, as I said, for control lab studies. Of course, there's field studies like 1,800 animals dying in India, and the Animal Husbandry Department traced it to their grazing in the BT cotton fields. The stomachs were totally poisoned, and all the organic matter was just sitting undigested. Those bacteria I told you that are being killed in the soil, beneficial bacteria are needed in our stomach. We have more diversity in our stomach than we know. It's a forest out there. Those bacteria are dying. in America, while they're not studying in a systematic way, the trends of disease are very clear. Since 2000, when the GMOs were introduced, the graph of every disease, cancer, autism, intestinal problems, is shooting up like this. It's exponential.
Could it be that the population is growing?
No. No, this is proportionate to the population increase. And per thousand is what they measure. Okay. So the population might be growing, but the per thousand figure takes that into account. Okay. Now, in Europe, the first study done was the UK government, £35 million spent on a study. Arpad Putsai, most famous lectin expert of the world, asked to study what happens with GM food. He fed these GM potatoes to rats. They had been engineered with the Monsanto gene. He was pro-GMO. But when he saw the results, he was shocked. He went to his director, said, the rats, the brains are shrinking, the pancreas is expanding, and the intestine is damaged. The director and he held a press conference. Within a day, his lab was closed, and a gag order was put on him. He had migrated from Hungary after the war. He said, I'm going back to Hungary, because there's more freedom out there than in this world. A lady called Irina Ernikova, Russian Academy of Sciences, did a study on feeding rats GMO food versus non-GM food. Half of the offspring of the GM-fed rats died, and among the surviving, they had huge amounts of mammalian cancer. They tried to block her research by blocking samples, blocking money. Today, she is Putin's advisor, and Russia has said no to GMOs. Russia has said, we will grow our own food and we will grow it organically. More recently, a Dr. Seralini in France, he used to be a regulator in the European Union, and he found the studies Monsanto was submitting were very sloppy. And he said, this is too serious. So he went back to his university, gave up his government job, did a 2-year study. It's never been done. Most studies are 3-month studies. 2-year study. And what he found, and it was published in the Journal of Food and Chemical Toxicology, was failure of organs, particularly vital organs like liver and kidney, and higher levels of mammalian cancer. They tried to retract the study. The journal said it's peer-reviewed. They appointed a Monsanto man as an editor, who then retracted it. They've had to put Seralini's reply. So what I'm witnessing in my 40 years of a scientific career is a terrorism against independent knowledge. There are few scientists who are picked up by Monsanto and the biotechnology industry who are told to repeat like parrots, it produces more, solution to hunger, proof of safety, no one died. And then every lab that is showing, not because it was looking for it, but because it is finding the word. There's a research lab in South Carolina. A woman found huge impacts. Monsanto's after her, shut the lab. But she is the top scientist in her field for the US government. That's the level where this is reaching. I have called it knowledge terrorism. You're not allowing people to know, and then you say everything is fine? And then people will be dropping dead with cancer. In America, kids have leaky gut syndrome. Leaky gut means your gut is getting holes. And parents are shifting their kids to organic diets. The movement has become so strong in US because the government has not let them know. They now have a GMO-free label. The GMO labeling wasn't around. They have a GMO-free label so mothers can feed their kids healthy food because there's an epidemic of intestinal problems. The organic industry with a non-GM label has exploded.
Doc, so what would you advise our government? I mean, we have a Plant Breeders Bill, which is a clause 23, which says that, you must protect somebody's intellectual property. And the analogy they use is, oh, so somebody wrote a book. Obviously we know what's in the book and I can replicate it. But when it comes to plant, I'm not supposed to know how you came about the plant. And yet still I'm supposed to protect this intellectual property. How do we go about this?
Well, it's the fraud of intellectual property rights on life forms and seeds. That is the reason I do what I do for the last 30 years. I was invited in 1987 to a meeting on biotechnology where the industry laid out very honestly what they wanted to achieve. It was the chemical industry, which was now becoming the biotech industry and wanting to own seed. They said we have to do genetic engineering in order to have ownership of seed, and we will create new intellectual property rights to do this. Monsanto later admitted that they wrote the clauses in the World Trade Organization. But even the World Trade Organization only requires patents on microorganisms. It allows countries to exclude plants from patenting. My country has excluded them. And it allows countries to have a sui generis option. My country has created the sui generis option. I was on the drafting committee. We've put a farmer's rights into our bill. When they say, I want intellectual property rights, you write a book, well, you write a book through your creativity. It comes through your imagination. You don't steal someone else's book and copy it. That is called plagiarism. In the case of seed, the original breeders are farmers. If anyone's intellectual property rights need protection, it is farmers' rights as collective rights. All that the corporations are doing is taking farmers' seeds, shooting a toxic gene into it, saying, I am the inventor and creator, and I sometimes joke and say, GMO for Monsanto means God move over. I'm taking over as the creator of this planet, and I'll collect rents. You allowed life to reproduce in freedom, but I will make sure life has to take permission from me. The seed must take my permission to grow. And I've had these debates with these crazies, and I have to say they're crazy. They say when they spray Roundup and kill all the diversity, which could be the amaranth greens and other food, they are preventing the weeds from stealing the sunshine, as if the sun decided only to shine on Monsanto's Roundup-resistant crops. When we had movements in India, they said the peasants were stupid because they were bringing technologies that prevent the bees from usurping the pollen. The bees' work is to pollinate. When you think of them as usurping the pollen and kill them, our food security goes down, 20% decline in yields. So this idea of intellectual property rights on seed is wrong scientifically because seed is not invented. It doesn't get created when you put a gene into it. It's created over millennia of evolution and thousands of years of breeding. The second fraud is a legal fraud, as if it's when Monsanto touches a seed that intellectual work starts. The farmer had no contribution. The third is a moral fraud. How can you turn around and say, I am the creator? That ethical and moral fraud is what Pope Francis just addressed in a speech recently, and I've been invited by him to discuss these issues in depth, to create a new economic paradigm for justice. And of course, a patent or a breeder's right means a monopoly on seed because the farmer can't have their own seed. That's what these laws are designed for. They criminalize seed saving, they criminalize seed exchange. And I took a pledge in '87 when I heard these companies that they had to prevent the farmer from saving seed. I said, my work for the rest of my life will be protecting the seed and encouraging farmers to perform their ethical and ecological duty to save the seeds. Your politicians and your government should know we are standing at a watershed. They should take inspiration from the freedom movement of this country and not give up the freedom of seed on a platter. And they should definitely not let a few lobbyists who work through the biotechnology industry, whose bread and butter and lots of jam comes through those payments, to dictate the future of Ghana on seed sovereignty and food sovereignty. This must be decided by the people of Ghana.
Dr. Vandana Shiva, a word to the wise is enough. And I hope that we get a chance to, whenever we play this show, repeat it again someday. And there is absolutely no way that we can trade our future to this. I mean, it just doesn't add up in any which way whatsoever. After the interview, I'm almost sad. But thank you very much for watching. As I say, tomorrow we'll be back to do it all over again.